Ayrton Senna had a really unusual throttle technique.
On acceleration out of the corner, Senna's unique technique is equally obvious.
Yep, Senna is very much on a quick one.
Ayrton Senna had a unique throttle technique that no other F1 driver used. Footage of him fluttering on the gas pedal mid-turn, where you can hear the revs bouncing while he's in the middle of the corner, are all over the internet. I have poured over hours of footage trying to figure out what he was doing, trying to understand how and why this worked. Some people say it was from the turbo era, but he did it in NA cars too. Some people say that it was because of his old days in karts and he just never got over it, as if the three-time world champion couldn't overcome a bad habit. We've narrowed it down to 3 theories as to why the Brazilian Formula One driver did what he did, what most driving instructors would tell you never to do. And today, we're gonna get out on track and we're gonna test him out.
And what do you know? Honda came through in the clutch again and loaned us the perfect car for the job from its heritage collection, a 1991 Acura NSX.
While the car is gorgeous, we'll have plenty of time to look at it later. Let's start by talking about why Senna's throttle technique is so strange in the first place. As you brake for a corner, the weight of the car shifts forward onto the nose. Then, as you turn, the weight shifts onto the outside tires. As you accelerate out of a corner, the weight shifts back towards the rear of the car. So to get through a corner as quickly as possible, drivers try to smoothly transition that weight from the front to the side, then to the rear without crossing a limited grip. That's not what Senna did. Instead, Senna would stab the throttle throughout the corner, which would send any regular driver spinning, or at least give you a big slide to have to catch. Now there's something that does need to be said here. I'm a pretty good driver. I've got a lot of experience and I've won a lot of races, but I'm not Ayrton Senna. It's all well and good to talk about a theory, to talk about a driving technique and test it out, but to have the experience in doing that and the skill that Senna had to be able to turn that into speed, well, that takes more than a day, even for the best of drivers. So our results today might be kind of mixed. I'm just hoping that we're gonna get something definitive, something that shows that this could work, that this could be an improvement over what most people do, over what I do, and maybe a little something extra to add to my bag of tricks. Plenty of others have analyzed this technique, including former test driver at McLaren, Jonathan Palmer, who speculated that this was Senna testing the grip so he could get to full throttle earlier. And there's a great video from Driver 61 which drew the conclusion that Senna's pedal technique was so rapid that the inertia in the vehicle, coupled with the spring frequency in the suspension, meant his foot was oscillating fast enough to not upset the balance. I used these 2 takes to build my first theory, that Senna used this technique as a way to quickly test how much tire grip was available to him without upsetting the car's balance. In this footage from Monaco qualifying in 1986, you can hear Senna blipping the throttle mid-corner, even on his outlap. If this is him testing for grip, it means Senna knows a lot more about his tires by the time he comes around for his hot lap. Now there's something that I tell my students to do all the time, and that is to ask the car questions. The more information you have about your proximity to the limit of the tires, the more you can get out of the car mid-corner. So if I go into this corner and I add some steering, well, now I know that I was being limited by the rears. With Senna's technique, you can ask this question 4 or 5 or 20 times in one corner. Well, that's the theory anyway. Let's try it out. Now, this NSX has modern 200 treadwear tires on it, way more grip than it would have had stock. So that just exemplifies this idea that I need to figure out how much grip I really have available to me. I gotta say, that actually works pretty well. This theory isn't about being faster, it's about learning faster. And after just a few passes in these corners, it felt like I was getting an understanding of what these tires can handle. The problem is this technique requires a level of finesse that not everybody has. Woo! You didn't see that. Clearly, it takes more than 45 minutes to really master this technique, but it was certainly helping me to understand the behavior of the car. For instance, in this NSX, the Senna tire testing technique was pushing the car towards understeer, but when I tried to test tire grip using additional steering input, the car would lean more towards oversteer. Not to mention all the other effects that come with turning the steering wheel further. With either technique, you're testing tire grip through something else. And I wonder if that's a way to test the limits without upsetting the car more. I mean, it certainly isn't upsetting the car more now while I do it. So could I make these tests happen at a higher speed? I guess we have to try it some more.
Today's video is brought to you by FlexiSpot. So they say real estate is the best investment. You know what I've realized? That applies to desk space too, which is why after almost 7 years of running the drive from my backyard shed office, I finally upgraded to a new FlexiSpot E7L standing desk. It is so freaking nice to ditch the old uplift rectangle I was using and finally just spread out. 3 steel legs with triple motors for smooth and stable operation, 330-pound weight capacity, no wobble even at the max 50-inch heights. For about half of what you pay for a bare-bones uplift unit, you can get a complete FlexiSpot E7L desk with a beautiful 2-piece bamboo top and a crazy 15-year warranty. That's triple the coverage that competitors like Fezzibo offer. As the Drive's editor-in-chief, my desk is mission control. Everything we do, articles, videos, podcasts, runs through here, and it finally feels like I've got the real estate to make it all happen. FlexiSpot is having mega sales now, so don't miss it. Check the links in the description below to explore the E7L or the E7L Lite if you're on a tighter budget. Use our code YTE7P50 to save $50 on top of that, and leave a note saying The Drive at checkout so they know we sent you there. Supporting our sponsors helps support this channel, and it means a lot to us.
So there's certainly some merit to this idea, but Senna didn't only use this technique on outlaps. In some of his fastest qualifying laps and even mid-race, he's still stabbing at the throttle. It may seem like something he used in all conditions, but that's not actually true. As I watched more and more of this old footage, I started to realize the thing so many people miss is that there are plenty of times he doesn't use his technique at all.
So Ayrton Senna absolutely on the limit.
In the 1985 Adelaide Grand Prix qualifying, for instance, Senna has a more traditional driving technique. What's different is the car. In that qualifying session, his Lotus seems much more balanced, maybe skewing slightly towards oversteer. You can see that on this lap, Senna is struggling for rear grip on corner exit as he puts his foot down. So, if Senna doesn't use his pedal technique when the car is more oversteer biased, maybe that means it was a technique to combat understeer. This is theory number 2, and here's why it makes sense. While getting on the throttle does transfer weight to the back, in a rear-wheel drive car, it can also break the rear tires loose. If you go into a corner and experience understeer, you can blip the throttle to break traction in the rear and rotate the car. If that doesn't work immediately, don't worry, because as you let off the throttle from that blip, the weight shifts back to the nose. And if you blip the throttle again, right as the rear is at its lightest, you're giving the car every opportunity to rotate. Doing this little by little repeatedly is why it looks like Senna's foot is bouncing on the throttle. Matching the rhythm of the car's weight transfer with the throttle is exactly what this Dodge Demon is doing, just aiming for different results. We also noticed that Senna mainly used this technique in low-speed corners where the car was most likely to understeer. A car that's balanced in high-speed corners tends to understeer in the low speeds, so if the car wasn't set up the way Senna liked, he could use this technique to help balance the car out. We chose the NSX for this test because Senna actually had a hand in developing it. After test driving a prototype, he gave Honda feedback on how the chassis needed to be stiffened up. There's some very famous footage of Senna driving the NSX-R around Suzuka, and it's one of the most clear examples of Senna using his throttle pedal technique. But there's also footage from an earlier test drive of the NSX, also at Suzuka, where he's not using the technique as much. That earlier NSX clearly has a much more lively rear end. So in that first test, the car was giving us some understeer, some oversteer, depending on which turn and which part of the turn we were in. For this next test, we need it to understeer. So we're gonna adjust the tire pressures and get back out there and keep testing. And while we make some changes to the car, we're also going to make some changes to the track. Chuckwalla is famous for its long sweepers and consistent radius turns, so we're going to make one of the corners tighter by moving the apex out with some cones. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna try this my way first, which is to create the understeer on the throttle and then smoothly release. So there's the understeer. I'm going to smoothly release, load the front end, and then get back on the gas. And that felt like a pretty fast exit. Felt like a pretty fast corner.
I was like, was that your gentle entry?
Yes, it was. Look, man, not my fault you can't keep up with the actual pinnacle of automotive sports car design.
Okay, yeah, can't hate on the NSX.
All right, here we go. Version 2, the Senna version. I'm going to enter the corner the same way. I'm gonna get on the brakes, I'm gonna slow the car down, pitch it in, on the throttle, create a little bit of understeer, and then I'm just gonna get on and off the gas and try to get the front end desperately to grip. Did it work? Well, I got a little bit of rotation. I would actually say I got less rotation doing it that way. All right, let's try it again, go in the other direction. Same exact thing, I'm gonna pitch it in. I'm gonna create a little bit of understeer on the throttle, and then instead of doing a big lift, on and off, on and off. Ooh, I even had to do it again at the exit. I don't know, it's hard to tell. Clearly both work to load the front end and get the car to rotate, but is one actually going to be faster than the other? I honestly don't know, I can't tell. It feels like I'm at the limit either way. Here we go, pitching it in, on the power. Look, ooh, straight to oversteer, huh? You know, one thing I noticed there, even though the car didn't understeer on me, it oversteered. But on the exit, when I got that little kick of oversteer, normally my instinct would be just to do a smooth release, try not to upset the car too much. But that time, I did a really quick, abrupt, full lift, full back on power. And the car didn't have the time to pitch on me. Maybe there's something to this. It's like the resonant frequency of the suspension is slow enough that I can make my throttle inputs faster than that frequency. And because it's faster than the frequency, the car's not transferring all that weight. And because it didn't transfer the weight, it didn't go into a worse oversteer. I was able to manage the speed without making the balance worse. Joey, I think this might be working.
Yeah?
Yeah. We used GPS data through the corner to compare the amount of time taken and minimum speeds side by side. While the results with Senna's technique weren't any faster on average, the fact that I was matching pace while experimenting with the throttle does say something. The more this technique starts to make sense in my brain though, the more I can see just how in tune you'd have to be for this to become second nature. This technique is something that Senna honed over years of racing the best of the best, so playing around with it for just a day is only going to get me so far. Senna was known for being able to achieve a near faultless flow state.
And I was in a different dimension for me.
But even Senna wasn't immune to making mistakes, which brings me to my third theory. So the idea here is, if you enter a corner too slow, you have to wait to get back on the gas, and then you're left coasting until the right time to pick up the throttle. If you pick up the throttle too early, you're gonna risk changing the balance of the car and creating an oversteer that you didn't want, and ultimately you're probably gonna have to get off of the throttle on the exit, exactly when you wanna be on the throttle the hardest. To achieve a perfect lap time, you need to nail the corner entry speed. Slow corners with long entries are extremely difficult to get inch perfect, even for F1 drivers. So Senna's technique would make sure he could work back to the limited grip, even if he overslowed by misjudging the braking point. The quick pedal work would help him keep the minimum speed up through a corner while not upsetting the car's balance. Other drivers that stay off the gas through the corner would lose momentum, or might try to get on the throttle a little bit too early to compensate, which results in a big transfer of weight and ultimately hurts their exit speed. With Senna's technique, he might be keeping the speed up through the corner and creating less of a drastic weight shift on corner exit. So let's try it again, Senna's way, and see if I can fill in some of that entry speed without hurting my exit and my ability to get back on the gas. Here we go. So I'm gonna enter at the same speed, but instead of being off the gas, I'm gonna flutter, 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 flutter. Well, the car was certainly more lively doing it that way. Was it faster though? Most certainly, I was utilizing more of the tire's grip for more of the turn. But did I unintentionally also reduce the limits of the tires by doing it? We'll have to rely on the data to find that out. Turn in and flutter, keep the tires at their limit, at the limit, at the limit, and can't pick it up yet. Now I can pick it up. Interesting, that time I got a little bit of understeer about halfway through the turn, which would imply that I was going faster. Well, of course I was going faster. I was using way more throttle, even if it was sporadic. There was more average throttle, more total throttle throughout the turn. Let's do this a couple more times. As I've refined this technique a little bit further, I got the same understeer mid-corner that I did on a previous attempt, but this time I was able to match the rate of my throttle fluttering to the suspension pitch of the car, and it fixed the understeer, and I was back to wide open earlier than I otherwise would have been. So let's do one more smooth one just to give it a fair chance and compare. So I'm just gonna wait, and we'll look at the actual speeds. Now I'm picking up the throttle at the right time, quote unquote, and there we go. I went back and forth between trying this corner Senna's way and trying it the traditional way, and the data did show that Senna's technique kept the minimum speed up above 50 miles per hour. Turn in, flutter, keep the tires at their limit, and can't pick it up yet. Now I can pick it up. But to see real gains from this technique in terms of lap time, your focus has to be on another level. Ooh, that was just too much speed. Come on, Nick, be like Senna. All right, here we go. Turn it in, under the limit, let's flutter. Okay, well, it probably looked cool. Maybe not exactly what I was going for, oh well. Look, Senna was one of, if not the greatest to ever do it. There's no chance that I'm going to be able to replicate exactly his technique in half a day, right? It's not possible. Even if I had a lifetime, I probably couldn't do it. So you know what I'm gonna do now? I'm just gonna go drive a lap. If you had access to this car and this track and you didn't, what would be wrong with you? While we were going through this analysis and coming up with these theories, one of our producers made a comment that all of these techniques sound like things that people do at local track days. There are drivers that try to fix overslowing with more throttle. There are drivers that use the throttle to react to understeer. There are drivers that try and feel out their tires. None of that is particularly unique or groundbreaking, and maybe that's actually the truth of it. Maybe Senna was doing something that every driver does, but he was doing it at such a speed and with such a quick understanding of the results that it looks like an advanced technique. His mastery of throttle control was just another tool he could use to get the car to do what he wanted it to do. God, this car is good. And the interesting thing, when I'm not trying to run a test or talk to you guys, honestly, it just came much more naturally to apply the stuff that we've been talking about today. It just made sense to flutter on the gas and get the front end to bite. I feel like in the little bit of time that we've spent today working on this technique, it's already becoming part of like my driving repertoire in a way that is effective. Yeah, and it just worked to do it quickly like that. Maybe it's car specific. Maybe it's mid-engine or rear weight specific. I'm not really sure. I don't know that I would do it all the time because it's probably putting more load on the drivetrain, but it is really interesting. It is really interesting. It feels good. The most frustrating part about this is that while I feel like I'm on the right track, the only real way to know would have been to ask him, and unfortunately that's not possible. But even if the whole truth of Senna's technique continues to be a mystery, I've at least now got a few new tricks that I want to try and master.
So, you're not Senna, but I'm not you. Do you think this is something that people can actually learn? Or do you need to be born with the intuition it takes to read what's going on when you're stabbing the throttle like that in mid-corner?
Intuition definitely helps a lot. But I'm a driving coach, right? I teach people who have all different types of experience level and intuition level to be able to do things that maybe they didn't think they could do before they started. Anybody can get in a car and stab the gas pedal 100 times in the middle of a turn, and the car is going to respond in some way. But can anybody learn to feel the tires better and get more feedback from the car and have their inputs adjust to create a situation in the balance of the car that they want? Absolutely, anybody can learn that.
It's almost like Senna was acting as his own human traction control system, because there is a lot of systems now in cars today that will do things to the throttle or the brake, especially when you're in a high-speed situation, to compensate for your lack of, truly accurate inputs. And he was just able to, it was like a human computer. He was able to sense what was going on through the tires, through the car, and adjust very, very quickly. And not only make those adjustments, but understand why he was making those adjustments and what he was expecting to get out of it, all in the, like, again, like 5 times in the middle of a high-speed corner. Like, that's insane.
That's what makes it such a mystery, because Senna's not the only driver, especially at the upper level of Formula One, who's doing that sort of thing. He just did it in a different way. But here's what I'm going to say about this. We tested 3 different theories. I think the answer is all of those, and probably others that we haven't talked about or haven't even thought of. It's a dynamic situation, right? When you're on track. The car is going to understeer in some places. It's going to oversteer in other places. It's going to be speed dependent. It's going to be steering angle dependent. It's going to be condition dependent. And that's where it all came together for me when I did that complete lap, because it isn't the same thing everywhere for the same reasons. But if you have this tool in your repertoire to pull it out, you can whenever the situation demands it.
But I also think it's true that you have a larger toolkit than me, for example, as a professional driver. Like, I think of it like playing a piano, right? Like, anyone can walk up to a piano, there's 88 keys, just start pressing them, making noise. Like, you know that key sounds different than that key by hearing them. But a actual piano player will sit down and knows instinctively, if I do this, this, and this at the same time, if I press all these keys together in this sequence, it will make actual music versus just pounding on the keyboard. They look the same to an untrained observer, but a completely different result.
The result's the whole thing. Even if you're untrained, even if you don't know how to do it necessarily, if you're focused on getting towards a particular result, you can usually get your inputs to eventually take you there. So as long as you know what you're after, I think you can have enough monkeys slamming on keyboards to create, it's usually Shakespeare. In this case, I guess it's Bach.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's also a tragic thing that we can't ask Senna about this today, but it's also kind of added to his wondrous legacy. Everyone can see his skills, like everyone can see his lap times, his undeniable prowess on the track, but everyone can look at this and have very different conclusions or reasons or thoughts of why he was doing this. And I think it's really added to the mystique in a really interesting way.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I have never been more nervous coming into a shoot day than I was today, because it's not like we were trying to say, oh, here's a thing that some pro drivers do, let's go see if it works. No, we're saying, let's try to take this thing that arguably the greatest driver who ever lived did, and only he did, and try to recreate that. And you've got like 2 hours to figure it out to a point where it's actually useful. I've never been more nervous.
Well, I think you did a pretty good job.
Thank you, Kyle. I think that I learned something that I'm going to explore further after today, because again, it kind of did work.
Obviously, none of us are Senna, but we can all try to figure it out. And I really hope you learned something today with this video. A big thanks to Honda for loaning us the NSX from their Heritage Collection again. And thanks to Chuckwalla Raceway for welcoming us here today. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
All right, everybody, that's lunch. That's lunch, Nick. You don't have to go out on track anymore. You don't have to go beat up the car more. Nick, that's lunch.
Sorry, I can't hear you. There's wind. I don't know what you're saying.